Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Crown Services. As previously agreed, questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The member for St. James.
Thank you very much. Just one quick question for the Minister relating to the review, the hydro review. Will systemic racism be considered as part of the review? Systemic racism and its impact on kiosk development be considered as part of the hydro review, which is forthcoming?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. For some reason, we're getting every second word on our audio. I'm not sure why. Everything else seems to be working and functioning perfectly. However, the audio doesn't seem to be quite right yet. So I heard the word systemic racism. I didn't hear anything else from the member. If you could repeat it again, but hopefully we're going to get past this shortly. Sounds like a connectivity thing.
Okay, just a moment. I'm just going to check with our tech people. Hang on.
Yeah, it's still happening, Mr. Chair.
Can you hear me clearly, Minister, if I'm talking? Am I comprehensible, as in audibly comprehensible?
No, you are coming through very choppy. Half words. You know what? Maybe I'll dial back in. Maybe that'll be helpful.
Let's try that. Why don't you dial back in?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Minister. Can you hear me clearly? No.
No.
Can other members in the committee hear me clearly? Or am I comprehensible, Cindy? I'm not
You're coming in very clear on my end.
Okay. We've sent an email to tech, and we'll see if that improves things. Minister, am I still chopping up? Minister, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Very choppy.
Okay. Okay, we're going to take a... Is it the will of the committee to take a 5-minute recess while tech support attempts to work out these issues?
Great.
Why don't you just text him the question?
I believe the question needs to be recorded by Hansard. So texting or emailing is not, unfortunately, an option, though that I appreciate the common sense suggestion, but it's not a viable option for us because of convention.
Everything is fine for me, so I'm not sure what the tech issue is.
Nobody's really sure, and that's what we're working on.
Hear clearly, so.
Yeah, I can see you on the screen there, but there's no audio for some reason.
Just bear with us, folks. We'll get this sorted out just as soon as we can.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Minister.
I've got you 100%. We were mirroring to a larger screen, and we just took it off of that, and now I can hear you clear.
Okay, the problem seems to be resolved. The member for St. James with a question for the Minister of Crown Services.
Relating to the hydro review, will the impacts of systemic racism during the development of kiosk or those projects be considered as part of the hydro review?
No.
No.
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to assume the members talking about a review. Would he be referring to the economic review of kiosk and buying pole?
The member for St. James.
Yes, the forthcoming Manitoba Hydro review being led by Mr. Bradwell.
Mr. Chair?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, we're certainly looking forward to the RKB report coming soon. And I know that in the report, there's a number of areas that were mandated. And again, one of them is, again, in capital projects, project management, partnerships that Manitoba Hydro has with, for instance, First Nations communities and other folks as well. So, directly to the member's question, it will be a fully encompassing report, and specifically to his question, I can only suggest that Mr. Wall's report will include a number of areas, which include partnerships, which I would assume might touch on that area.
The member for St. James.
I'd like to pass the floor to the member for Tyndall Park for a grand total of 10 minutes, so limiting that till 3:15.
The member for Tyndall Park, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I have a briefing note on the subject of Strategy 2040 and Life Cycle Business Model Implementation. And I was hoping that the minister could explain to us a little bit about what the strategy is and the business model itself.
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly welcome the member from Tyndall Park to estimates, and hope you and your family are staying well, and certainly are surviving these very challenging times. And thank you so much for the question. Manitoba Hydro Strategy Plan 2040 essentially can give the member a quick overview, and certainly would be willing to provide more details. I know that she has limited time, and I would assume she would have further questions. But what I can tell the member is Manitoba Hydro is developing a strategic plan that is intended to provide long-term direction for Manitoba Hydro and the corporation for the next 20 years, and can translate into short-term operational work plans. So the strategy will confirm the organizational mandate and goals, identify priority areas based on customer needs, consider the organizational structure, and address how to make existing business units more effective, and also establish a roadmap of implementing key initiatives. Manitoba Hydro expects that, of course, will work with government and provide direction to ensure the strategy aligns with the energy policy. And again, the corporation's mandate is understood that strategies impacts rates, debt, and provincial economic development, of course, and the strategy is fair for all Manitobans who are the owners of Manitoba Hydro. I hope that is a quick overview. Again, if the member wanted more, I'm certainly happy to take that offline.
The member for Tyndale Park.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer, and I am curious just about a few more details as to how those are actually going to be implemented, as well as what brought on the need for this strategy, who brought it forward, what parties were consulted.
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, and again, I thank the member from Tyndall Park for the question. And yesterday we had some discussion regarding exactly this area that the member touches on, and I just related it to the business sector at large, or even public sector, in particular to Crowns, where each business or Crown will undergo essentially a review of the business, their model. Is it adapting well to change, to changing environment? Is it adapting well to issues like COVID? I mean, COVID has shown us and shown Manitobans some areas that we need to improve on, and one of them is connectivity, for instance. And the member will know that that's an area that our government is focusing in on. But again, Hydro has taken on this initiative to ensure that they're aligned in their core mandate of supplying electricity at low rates for all Manitobans, and that is their core business, and that is what they'll continue to focus on during this review. And we certainly commend them for taking the initiative to move forward with this review, because as I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it again for Hansard and for the member from Tyndall Park, this is a necessary part of operating a corporation / business. These are areas that if you don't look at your model and evolve, you will fall behind, and eventually it'll end up costing you money. So, this is a very good move by the leadership team of Manitoba Hydro and board and the board's blessing as well. And they understand that this is a very necessary area for them to move forward in light of what has happened over the last 20 years with respect to the former NDP government, of course, leaving generations of Manitobans with Visa cards that are already maxed out and interest rates that, thank the Lord, are low right now, but go up by 1 point Mr. Chair, and Manitobans are going to feel the pinch of what the NDP provided as far as the mess that we continue to clean up in collaboration with our stakeholders. So I hope that was a long-winded answer, the member from Tyndall Park, but certainly willing to take another question.
The member for Tyndall Park.
The minister mentions a strategy, that the strategy is going to be a roadmap to implement key initiatives. What initiatives does the minister expect to see?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister of Crown Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Manitoba Hydro understands and is aware that they need to, stick with their core mandate of providing good, clean, renewable energy to Manitobans for generations to come, to supply their homes and businesses, of course. The strategic model or plan will include things like customer-centric. So the days of recognizing or not recognizing that we do have customers, and Manitoba Hydro staff understand that and they know that. So putting in a model that recognizes that every time that phone rings or they get an email, that's a customer. And they're going to move forward with that again, working in collaboration with ratepayers and Manitobans to ensure that their needs are looked after for generations to come. This is a very evolving energy landscape that we're in right now. Well, Manitoba Hydro has to position themselves to ensure that they're ready for that evolving landscape. And that's exactly what this strategic plan will focus on, so that they're ready to confirm or ready to ensure that they can supply their core mandated green, clean electric power to Manitobans in their homes and businesses for generations to come.
The member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. And if the MLA for St. James permits it, I'll ask one more question.
So the rules actually do specify that the chair has the call, and I was seeking to operate in good faith on the understanding. By my watch, there was a minute and a half or so left. So I'll give the floor to the member for Tyndall Park one final time, and this will be the final question. The member for Tyndall Park.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Just with respect to the strategy, when is it going to be made available for the public?
The Honourable Minister.
Just, it's coming, right?
Oh, Rob.
They're working on it.
Rob.
Gotcha. Mr. Chair. Hello.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member from Tyndall Park for that question. And certainly we know that Manitoba Hydro over the last several months have had to shift a little bit with COVID. And of course that is going to cause some issues, obviously, with moving certain projects forward. But I can tell the member that they have an aggressive timeline because they know this is an area that's going to have a very positive benefit for Manitobans. So at this point, I could say to the member, certainly they're motivated to get this report done and completed so that Manitobans who take part in this process will have the ability to benefit from its findings and its outcome for the next 20 years.
Are there any further questions? Hearing no further questions, we will now proceed to consideration of the resolutions relevant to this department. At this time, I invite virtual members to unmute themselves so they can respond to the question. I will now call resolution number 5.2. Resolution 5.2, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,170,000 for Crown Services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 5.3, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,605,334,000 for Crown Services, other reporting entities' capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 5.1A, the Minister's salary contained in Resolution 5.1. The floor is open for questions. We now move to the resolution. Resolution 5.1, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $662,000 for Crown Services administration for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of the Department of Crown Services. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Finance. Shall we briefly recess to allow the Minister and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department?
Agreed.
Okay, in my judgment, we will have a minimal recess to get the Minister of Finance communicated with and dialed in, and then we'll proceed as soon as is possible. So, committee recess, stretch your legs, but stay close to your computers. We'll get this up and running just as soon as we can.
I don't know if the chair is here at the meeting yet or not. I think it's understands Andrew Nicholfield. Andrew, are you around? Oh, there he is. Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, I'm ready when you are. Give me the nod and we'll get this thing up and running.
Let's do it, Andrew.
Scott, one final thing before we start. Do you have a headset that would really help us out at this end?
I do, but I think I don't. Do we have any? Do we have a headset? It doesn't fit into my iPad, but not that one. Okay. We got some earbuds. We're just looking for a headset. Why don't I read my opening comment and we're going to look for a headset, Andrew, and hopefully I can get it better. Is that okay with you?
Okay, we can work with that. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Finance. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm pleased to be here to consider the estimates of the Department of Finance for 2020-21. Manitoba Finance has shown outstanding financial and service leadership over the last few years, and will continue to do so in 2021. Finance has led government in important public sector initiatives to cut red tape and invest in transformational change. As a department, we have taken on our own projects to save money and give government procurement, cut the PST, reduce unnecessary regulation, and of course do our part to reduce the deficit. In terms of about finance, as a central agency, finance has responsibility for fiscal issues under the direction of Treasury Board and Cabinet. Briefly, I will introduce you with the appropriations within the department for which I am responsible. Just to go through certain areas, communication services, Manitoba leads the government communications in Manitoba's public service, supporting the work of all government departments and Crown corporations, agencies, and public bodies to provide helpful information to Manitobans in the most cost-effective manner possible. As the Queen's Printer of Manitoba, CSM, publishes the Manitoba Gazette, do you want to pass me those? The Gazette and other statutory publications, leads and coordinates Manitoba style and visual identity, oversees the use of our symbols, and ensures the effective administration and oversight of Crown copyright. In terms of fiscal and financial management, that's part of one of the departments. There's a variety of areas. Central finance provides central processing, accounting, and control over all government receipts and distributions that are processed through the central finance and accounting system. Prepares intern finance management reports, administration, insurance, self-insurance, and claim processing, and supports Manitoba's department agencies, Crown corporations by minimizing the adverse impacts of losses, provides executive planning, management, financial administration, supports the Finance Executive Council, Crown Services, and Civil Service Commission. In terms of Treasury Division, which manages the board program, cash resources, and investment and debt activities of the government and government entities. In terms of Taxation Division, which administers provincial tax statutes for Manitoba, including retail sales tax, taxation collection revenues in accordance with the statutes, and administers the collection, processing, and reporting of tax revenues. Tenancy Commission, processes and reports tax revenues, Tenancy Commission, Office of Public Guardian and Trustees, Automobile Insurance Compensation Appeal Commission, Claimant Advisory Office, and Office of Registrar General. Most of these branches, agencies, and commissions provide direct public service, with many performing decision-making functions. Last but not least, finance includes two separate special operating agencies. The first is the Manitoba Financial Services Agency, which includes the Manitoba Securities Commission, Real Estate Branch, and Financial Institutions Regulations Branch. The agency oversees regulations and licenses or delegates their duties as required. The Manitoba Capital Markets, security dealers, real estate agents, mortgage brokers, provincial insurance, and credit unions, and case populaires. Entrepreneurship Manitoba, also another special operating agency, provides an integrated suite of programs and innovative services improvements for entrepreneurs and businesses aimed at supporting and enhancing growth of Manitoba entrepreneurship and business community. Highlights of public accounts, I'd like to touch on some of the accomplishments over the last year. As you may be aware, I recently tabled the Manitoba public accounts for the last fiscal year. Skip the page here, but year-end financial results show a modest balance of $5 million, which reflects extraordinary amounts of hard work and planning focused in 2016. With prudence, determination, and foresight, the province was able to achieve balance while strongly increasing spending on health, education, and families by $3.4 billion. Nearly $700 million was put back into the kitchen table of Manitobans households and businesses through lower taxes and fees. As committed in Budget 2019, the province reduced the retail sales tax to 7% from 8% as of July 1st, 2019, and replenished the rainy day fund to close to $800 million. Manitoba's economy performed strong in 2019 and continues to be among the leading provinces in private sector investment. Private sector capital increased by over 26% over the last 2 years, the second highest amongst provinces. Income tax growth exceeded the province's expectations by $265 million, reflecting a strong local economy and growth, job growth. The province saved over $10 billion in incremental debt and associated $200 million in debt servicing costs, preparing Manitobans well to meet the public health needs. More work to do. We must maintain our commitments. COVID-19 has significantly impacted our fiscal outlook, and the government will focus on returning to balance over time while budgeting prudently, improving frontline services, and implementing ongoing tax savings for all Manitobans. Because of Manitoba's strong position entering COVID-19, the province was able to devote $2.3 billion to the pandemic response, 3.2% of gross domestic product, GDP, which is the third highest pandemic spending in Canada after Quebec, Ontario, the two hardest hit provinces. The Manitoba government created a robust set of spending programs and made significant investments in the healthcare system, including large procurement for personal protection equipment and medical equipment and expanded testing capacity. Other investments include public health preparedness, job supports, and economic stimulus to provide Manitobans with their livelihood. Finance will lead to maintaining a lower 7% provincial sales tax, PST, and the indexation of personal income tax brackets and the basic personal exemption. Continuing 2020 tax rollback guarantee by eliminating probate fees on approximately 3,500 estates each year and removing PST from income tax preparation. Prepare for phase out of education property tax and ensure Manitobans see those savings on the kitchen table, which is so important for Manitobans. Also, introduction of the budget implementation procedural legislation to allow for raising the threshold of the health and post-secondary education, commonly referred to as the payroll tax, which will benefit approximately 1,000 businesses, Manitoba medium-sized businesses, and exempt over 220 employers from the payroll tax altogether. We're also going to formalize the senior economic recovery credit was advanced to Manitobans to the tune of 226,000 Manitobans this spring in advance of the COVID-19. Also energizing the film sector by increasing the film tax production tax credit to 38% for the eligible producers and using Manitoba production corporations, and increasing the number of child care spaces eligible for the child care development tax credit to 682 spots. Maintaining our annual investment in strategic infrastructure of no less than $1.2 billion as we committed to, while developing a larger commitment that includes capital investments across summary budget government, ensuring our budget has significant resiliency to help protect Manitobans from the effects of possible flooding and other emergencies by increasing the rainy day fund to its highest level ever. Taking more steps to improve the transparency of our summary budget estimates of expenditure and public accounts, and integrate the reporting entities that add needless complexity. We also want to expand the scope of the Auditor General's investigation powers to hold accountable public bodies that receive taxpayer funds, review our balance sheet to address liabilities that were previously ignored and assets that were without value, continue to reduce the volatility and risk in government finances, capitalizing on millions of fake funds or capitalized on millions of fake funds that were left unfunded by previous governments. Introduction or reintroduction of legislation to streamline the process for the Public Utilities Board, enabling it to make decisions sooner and at least cost benefiting taxpayers and ratepayers. Continuing our efforts to reduce obsolete agencies, boards, and commissions, implementing balanced scorecard measures, including development of the development level measures to improve performance, accountability to taxpayers, and working with Manitoba Security Commission to proclaim the Real Estate Services Act by January 1st, 2021, which will update and enhance the industry's regulatory framework. We also want to encourage better coordination of the fragmented Manitoba pension investment model to reduce our management fees, improve disclosure, enhance returns for pensioners. We also want to accelerate the development of 13 additional schools and minimize administrative complexities by dissolving the Public Schools Finance Board and transferring the management of schools, capital projects to the Department of Central Services in coordination with the Department of Education, which manages capital investments on behalf of the province. We also want to leverage Open Manitoba portal to increase engagement with Manitobans, increase the amount of information on Engage Manitoba, Data Manitoba, and Info Manitoba, enhance the coordination of communications experts across summary budgeting, including major crown corporations, MAST, Efficiency Manitoba, the Liquor, Cannabis, and Gaming Authority, Shared Health, and the regional health authorities to reduce spending and share the value for money, as well as developing a single whole of government service focused on using user.
The minister's time has expired. We thank the minister for those comments. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement?
No, we don't have an opening statement. I just want to put it on the record, though. We were supposed to start this hearing at 3:15. The minister arrived late. It was 3:39 when we started this hearing. And I'd like to canvass leave of the committee to add 25 minutes and sit till 5:25 so the minister has enough time to answer these questions.
I agree.
Okay, it's actually not the purview of the committee to make those decisions. That is only allowable when the government and official opposition House leaders come to such an agreement.
Well, we're prepared to commence questioning.
Okay. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 7.1a contained in Resolution 7.1. Does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically or have a global discussion? Thank you. It is agreed then that questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner with all resolutions to be passed once questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions.
I'm sorry. Should I speak or raise my hand? How do you want me to get your attention?
I was just figuring out who I needed to look at on the screen. So the member for Fort Garry, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the minister can tell the committee how many Manitoba businesses have closed since the pandemic.
Minister, were you raising your hand?
Right, we're going to take that question on notice and get back to the minister, get back to the.
Honourable Minister, I need to acknowledge you before you speak. So, Honourable Minister.
What I would say is that we can take that question on notice and get back to the member. What I can tell you is the government is very proud of the fact when you look at all the bond rating agencies and the credit rating agencies, what they suggest is that the rebound in terms of the economy, now that's changed a little bit with the recent spike of cases that have happened. So there has been some public health directions to close different businesses. But what our government is very proud of the fact is that we are leading the nation, leading Canada when you look at the rebound, I guess, if you will, in terms of the jobs markets that are there. So in terms of the specific number, we can take that as notice and we can get back to the committee.
The member for Fort Garry.
Wondering if the minister can tell us what plans he has to support businesses in the second wave, and how are the supports in the second wave going to be different than the supports his government put in for the first wave?
Well, I'm glad the member asked that question.
The Honourable Minister.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chair, and I'll make sure that you provide notice. It's a new virtual thing for all of us here. So our government is very proud of the fact that we've made important investments to support not only individuals but businesses during the pandemic. The Parliamentary Budget Office has indicated that we're amongst the highest of all governments in Canada in terms of supports for individuals as well as businesses. Our supports represent about 3.2% of GDP, which is one of the highest in the nation. I believe Quebec is the highest right now. What we have put together is a number of programs. The first, I guess I would talk about is the Gap Protection Program. And so far, we've had close to 10,000 businesses, just under 10,000 businesses that have been supported by the Gap Protection Program. We truly think that that is one of the best business support programs in the country. We have a wage subsidy program where we had supports of close to 8,650 different businesses. We supported the risk recognition program with a sponsorship with the federal government. That was a $120 million program. What's important about this, it's a very broad-based program, and that supports close to 80,000 Manitobans, which represents about 12% of our labor force overall. In terms of youth employment, our government has, through a variety of the different programs that we've had, is at the highest level of hiring of youth in respect to itself. Our government has also committed close to $47 million in workforce development. That was something that was passed in the budget, so I thank all the members in opposition for supporting that as well. But really, at the end of the day, we want to listen to the business communities and make sure we have the supports in place. We truly think that our programs are broad-based programs. They're easy to access. Again, with the Gap Protection programs, once you apply and you get approved, you get the money within 2 business days. There's some flexibility. We've showed some flexibility to change the parameters of the program, extending programs out that are there. And we consulted with Manitobans, and we think that's important. We've had hundreds of meetings with business communities, and we're going to continue to do that as needs of businesses come up. We'll be supporting them. One thing that we're very proud of the fact since coming to government is we've provided about $700 million of tax relief to Manitobans and businesses. And that's going to help businesses grow and thrive, whether we're in the pandemic or after the fact. So as you can see from the robust programs that we have introduced, we're one amongst the top of the nation in terms of our supports for businesses and individuals.
The member for Fort Garry.
Wondering if the minister can outline where he sees gaps in the current support programs and where he thinks the government needs to put more supports that are currently missing.
Well, I would refer
the Honourable Minister.
I refer you to the Parliamentary Budget Office that suggests that Manitoba is second or third highest in terms of investments for businesses and individuals. I think the fact that we've invested in over 10,000 businesses have been supported through the wage subsidy program, the fact that there's a broad-based nature to a lot of these programs with things like the risk recognition program, where you have close to 80,000, just under 80,000 individuals that were supported. We're very proud of the fact that when the program was first announced through the federal government, they had a cap of about 2,500. We moved that up to 5,000 per month. And that represents about 12% of our labor force overall. So very proud of that. I would also point to some of the wage subsidy programs to get people back to work, as well as some of the youth programming, and the fact that we just invested close to $47 million in the workforce development that was passed in our budget. We have invested about $2.4 billion in supports for people and businesses during the COVID period. Some are in this year's budget, about $1.1 billion, and 2.3 when you measure out the fact that there's some capital-related projects, strategic infrastructure that will flow over 2 different years, as well as advertisation. We have also supported things like municipalities to the tune of about $106 million. We think that's important investments for them, and we've made some important investments with businesses. So to directly answer your question, we're going to continue to consult with businesses, and we have done that through the pandemic. We'll continue to do that. And if we believe that there's a need to make some changes, have some flexibility to the programs, we're always going to listen to the business community. We're always going to listen to individuals to make sure that the supports are in place to make sure Manitobans and Manitoba businesses are growing and thriving. And the fact that we are #1 in the nation in terms of rebounding, not my numbers, the Stats Canada numbers that have come out, as well as the bond rating agencies, as well as the banks, I think represents the fact that we've gotten a lot of the programming right. But again, we're not, I'd like to say we're close to the end of the pandemic. I don't think that is the case. There's going to be needs for supports for businesses and individuals well past the point of when there's a vaccine.
The member for Fort Garry.
Listening to the minister, I take it that there was no plan in place for the second wave. There was no consideration for new business supports for businesses that are now being asked to shut down a second time. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you may contemplate something in the future, but nothing was prepared or planned or in the process of being rolled out before today. Is that a fair statement?
The Honourable Minister.
Absolutely not. That's completely inaccurate. I would suggest to you that the plan that we put together over the 8th month of the pandemic so far has been one of the highest supports for individuals as well as businesses in the country. Don't believe me, believe what the Parliamentary Budget Office is suggesting. When you do have investments of $2.3 billion to support individuals and families, we think that is an important marker. We're always want to listen to Manitobans and individuals in terms of better supports or how you can have more flexibility with existing programs. So we're always going to listen to Manitobans and business community. That engagement will continue to happen. This was a long-term plan that the programs that are in place. I'll give you an example of that. The gap protection program. We have millions of dollars that we can continue to support Manitobans well past the timelines. We changed the deadlines for that. It wouldn't surprise me if you saw that the deadlines for a program like that may change again. So we think that having a good amount of money to support Manitobans, we're not going to apologize for having over $120 million in programs like the Gap Protection Program to support Manitobans. That will be ongoing. And we think, knowing the fact that just in the last 10 days alone, we've added or got the supports just in the Gap Protection Program, over $642,000 more supports for individuals, knows the fact that some of the programming we think is working very effectively. But again, we're going to listen to the business community and individuals and make decisions that are going to support Manitobans.
The member for Fort Garry.
Now, the gap protection program, you've set aside $120 million for that. Also, the other various back to work programs, there's another $120 million set aside. I think your comments in the media the other day is out of that $240 million, $73.5 million has been spent. So the vast majority of that money has not been spent. And the gap program is repayable loans. I'm wondering, given that businesses are complaining that they are being dragged down by debt, and given that you haven't touched most of that money, would the government consider just forgiving those loans and turning them into grants so that the businesses don't have to be saddled with more debt?
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, the member is completely confused on that. We have invested substantial amounts of money to support individuals and business. We'll continue to have flexibility. We truly think, and the Parliamentary Budget Office, a third party, is suggesting that we are amongst some of the highest supports for individual and business throughout the country. In fact, 3.2% of our GDP is there. Quite frankly, I'm not going to apologize to the member to having appropriated a good amount of money that we're still using, and knowing the fact that we had over $642,000 just over the last week and a half alone going out from the gap protection programs tells me that I think the program has been effective and will continue to be effective. But we're not going to stop there. We've had supports for things like the wage subsidy program, where you've had over 8,600 businesses that have been supported. The risk recognition program, that's for lower lower wage earners in our economy, upwards of 80,000. We have about 54,000 people working, for the most part, somewhere around that amount in our provincial economy, which represents about 12% of our labor force. Again, we've and all members voted on additional $47 million of workforce development dollars that will go to support. We haven't made announcements of what that money will go towards. The Minister of Economic Development and Training will be forthcoming with those types of items. There is also an important federal program, the Commercial Rent Assistance Program. We were the first in the country to partner with the federal government. The problem and what we really lobbied for at the finance minister's table is to make important changes to that program to ensure that tenants can apply for this program. Before businesses, you would have to have your landlord to apply for that program. So because of that lobbying effort that Premier Pallister did and others, other premiers and I would say other finance ministers at our weekly or biweekly meeting with the Minister of Finance, important changes have been made with that. So the federal government is supporting that. So now, for instance, if you have a business that is shut down, so let's use the example here in Manitoba because of some of the health restrictions, if you completely shut down, you would be eligible to get about 90% of your rent paid for by the federal government. That's kind of goes on a sliding scale down to support your rent that would be there. And I believe the federal government has extended that program out until well into next year. I believe it is next summer. We're hopeful that they'll continue to look at those types of things. But to directly answer your question, we're always going to be supportive of business communities and individuals to make sure the supports are in place for Manitobans.
The member for Fort Garry.
The question is, will this government consider grants and not loans to businesses? And if not, why not?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I just want to correct the record for the members putting wrong information on the record. That isn't a loan program. The GAP is made up of two different things. Number one, the premise of the program was that there was a lot of businesses that fell between the gap, hence the name, the Gap Protection Program. And so if you did, then you could apply for the $6,000 grant that would be made available to businesses. Now, you have to attest to this, that you didn't receive any federal supports. Now, if you did, let's say you decide to apply for the program, you receive the program, and then there's some other federal program that you apply for later on down the line, then what the grant would change into a loan that would be repayable. So to somehow suggest that it's just a grant program is just not accurate.
The member for Fort Garry.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not a grant program. And the question was, will this government commit to actually bringing in a grant program, because businesses do not need any more debt?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
No, the member is completely wrong again. It is a grant program. There is an ability for the loan component. I won't go through the explanation of the program again. So it is a grant program that is in place, and we would argue that it's one of the most generous programs in the country.
Okay.
The member for Fort Garry.
The business community has been complaining that the program's too restrictive, and one of the disqualifying provisions is whether a business qualifies for federal support, which is a lot more significant than what Manitoba is offering. Would you remove that criteria and allow businesses to access the program in addition to any federal support? And if not, why not?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
I'm going to refer you back to my previous comment. The GAP program is not the only business support program that we have in place. The GAP program is one program that was allocated at $120 million. There is other programs that the government has offered, and I'm going to repeat them. Some would be the wage subsidy program. We know that over 8,600 businesses have been supported by this. We know that there's supports for programs like the risk recognition program, where we've actually, with partnership with the federal government, have supported 12% of the Manitoba workforce. As you know, that represents somewhere over 650,000 people. We have youth unemployment rates, so it's the highest amount of youth employment that we've generated. That's through some of the government programs or allowing businesses that would be going there. There's $47 million that's allocated for the workforce development program that was passed in the last budget bill, as well as there's over 130 some odd million dollars allocated for contingency for support programs that would be in place. There is obviously important programs that the federal government has that our government, Premier Pallister, as well as at the finance minister table, we pushed for to make important changes to support businesses that are there. At the end of the day, I guess what I'd say is the GAP program is not the only program that's there. It's an important one, and it's been an important tool for businesses. But the reality is our programs have been broad-based programs that support a lot of people, just as I mentioned. Again, an example of that is the risk recognition program. 80,000 people have been supported by this. They're easy to access. GAP program. Once you apply for this and you gain access to the program, you get the money within 48 hours. That was one of the criticisms initially of the federal programs, that it would take too long to get the money in your pocket. Our program got the money within 48 hours. We provided some flexibility of programs, so there could be some changes that have happened. We've made those important changes. We're always going to look at reforming our programs to make it more efficient and effective. And that's really based on consultations with the business community as well as individuals. So we're going to continue to do that. And we'll listen to what not only the business community, but individuals have to say about this. That's kind of in stark contrast to the former government that decided to tax a lot of individuals and businesses. We've taken the direct opposite approach, where we provided over $700 million of tax relief to individuals as well as businesses, including things like the payroll tax that we added into the mix, as well as other smaller tax measures that will save individuals and businesses multi-thousands of dollars, depending on how big the business or individual is.
The member for Fort Garry.
During the first wave, your government allowed for tax deferrals. You didn't charge interest on Manitoba liquor and lottery receivables. You didn't charge interest or penalties on utilities and WCB and MPI contributions. And we applaud you for that. We certainly supported the government decision on that. Now that we're in a second wave, those things have expired. would this government support reinstating those policies? And if not, why wouldn't you do it for the second wave, but you would do it for the first wave?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, just give you some stats. So approximately 17,500.
Minister?
Yes.
The reverse side of your page is right in front of the camera.
Oh.
If you want to just hold it below the lens, then maybe we can see you and not your notes.
There's a lot of people, Mr. Chair, that have said I got a face for radio, so that's probably in line with a lot of thoughts of some of my constituents. Thank you.
That's not the purview of this discussion, Minister. Let's stick with the topic at hand. Anyway, Honourable Minister, you do have the floor.
Okay, approximately 17,500 people took advantage of some of the payroll PST remittance piece, and over 3,100 businesses took advantage of the payroll tax. To answer the member's question, I don't think anything's off the table. We would, we'll take ideas. Anything we can do to support Manitobans, we're going to review if it makes sense from a business case point of view, and if we think that it's something that will help businesses survive during this time period when there's been health orders. We would consider all these things, and so that's something that we'll continue to work with the business community and individuals, and we're going to continue to do that.
The member for Fort Garry.
Well, that's comforting to hear. Problem is, Minister, we're in a code red partial shutdown. So when are these decisions going to be made, and why aren't these deferrals being placed back into, use?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our government has made a whole bunch of broad-based programs, some programs that provide easy access to businesses, some flexibility with them. So I guess what I would say is all things are there. We want to look at a whole bunch of tools to make life easier for businesses, especially when they're struggling with COVID. And we're very proud of the fact that things like the Parliamentary Budget Office is suggesting that we're amongst the highest of the nation in terms of our supports for businesses and individuals. So my point is that we want to make sure there's a whole bunch of tools that are in there. And we think that there is a whole bunch of business support that is one tool. They're absolutely right. And we think that the fact that over 17,000 people were supported for those deferrals on the PST, and I believe over 3,500 in terms of the payroll tax deferrals is one of the tools that's there. So nothing's off the table, nothing's on the table.
The member for Fort Garry.
On October 1st, the moratorium on rental evictions was relaxed. Given that we are now in a second lockdown and there's going to be job losses, would this government commit to reimposing the eviction moratorium for rental housing?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our government was actually one of the first to offer a rent freeze and as well as an eviction moratorium. In fact, that lasted longer than other provinces like Ontario, like Alberta, and like Saskatchewan. So we think that was an appropriate amount of time. We want to make sure there's enough tools in the toolbox for businesses and individuals. The thing for individuals that we're most proud of, and let's say you're a senior that's on a fixed income, for instance, we made a seniors economic recovery tax credit of upwards of $200 available for individuals. We've also made a number of other different tax measures, not just the term of our office, which we've given about $700 million of tax breaks back to individuals so they can make life more affordable. But even during this pandemic, we've done things like reducing the PST on things like home insurance, which the vast majority of people use. The same thing with things such as will preparations and probate fees and all that, those sorts of things. Those are one of the elements that are there. But we were one of the last jurisdictions to lift the rent freeze component that's there. So we're very proud of the fact that we provided some flexibility for individuals as well as businesses. One thing that we have done for businesses, a part of our agreement with the federal government and the commercial rent program, was an eviction moratorium on commercial properties.
There's a disturbance. Please bear with us for a moment. Just bear with us, folks. Brief disruption. I think we can resume in about 20 seconds. Forgive me, who had the floor at the time of the disruption?
I did.
Who said that?
It's the member from Fort Garry.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. The member for Fort Garry, you have the floor again.
Thank you. Minister, you had indicated that now is not an appropriate time for a eviction moratorium, and I'm wondering why is that? Why is the second wave not an appropriate time for a more rental eviction moratorium, but the first wave was? What's changed that's no longer needed?
Mr. Chair?
The Honourable Minister.
That's not at all what I said. That was your words, not mine. What I said is nothing's off the table when you look at supports for individuals and businesses. Our government is very proud of the fact that we've had flexibility in a variety of our programs. Our concern when you do homework, I know when you were actually on the Residential Tenancy Commission from 2010 through 2016, I noted that every single above rent guideline applications, there's actually 2,079 above guideline applications were approved during the time where you're the commissioner, which is one of the chief decision makers that's a part of it. And so my concern is that past track record, that's not something that our government is going to follow. What we want to do is make sure that individuals are supported in Manitoba, that there's supports in place. And that's why our government is so proud of the fact that we've invested close to $2.3 billion in supports for individuals as well as businesses.
The member for Fort Garry.
You might want to update your opposition research. There's at no time did I ever approve a rental increase above guideline or otherwise. So you might want to take a note of that. Now, the business community says, and it's quite obvious, that some sectors are being hit harder than others. Other jurisdictions that have more engaged and involved governments actually have specific programs designed for tourism, hospitality that are targeted for these hardest hit industries. Would this government commit to specific sectoral programs in Manitoba? And if not, why not?
Sure.
The Honourable Minister, Minister, I apologize for the delay. I can't always see you. You're on the small screen, and so I'm trying to get that right. But Just acknowledge me and I'll acknowledge you right back. It's same with anyone else wanting to ask a question. But Minister, you do have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll raise my hand, I guess, when I'm ready to respond, make it easier on you and the rest of the committee. So our government will continue to consult with the business community for supports that are in place. We truly think that the supports that the Parliamentary Budget Office is suggesting second or third highest in the country, knowing the fact that we're investing 3.2% of our GDP, the fact that it's $2.3 billion support things like the App Protection Program, things like the Wage Subsidy Program, other important programs are supportive. We're always going to listen to the people in the business community. We're going to continue to do that. If we need to have some more flexibility with some of the programs that we have in place, we're going to listen to that. So there's absolutely nothing off the table.
The member for Fort Garry.
But I take it from your comments that nothing's in the works, nothing is planned at this point. You're still consulting with the business community.
The Honourable Minister.
We want to consult with the business community to make sure it's right, and that's how we've come up with our support program of close to $2.3 billion of supports for individuals and businesses. If you look at our program in the first 8 months of the pandemic, that Manitoba was actually the highest in terms of the rebound, I guess I'll call it, from the COVID. Now, the situation with businesses, because some of the closures are there, we've seen an uptick of some of our programs. For instance, an example of that is our wage subsidy, or rather our gap protection program. There is a lot of people in the accommodations and retail sector that have taken advantage of the gap protection program. And knowing the fact that we've flowed or had applications and supported close to $642,000 just in the last 10 days alone, we think that the programs are appropriate. But again, we're going to listen to the business community. Absolutely nothing is off the table.
The member for Fort Garry.
Now, I'm wondering if the minister would commit to disclose the state of spending on COVID-related programs voluntarily at the Public Accounts Committee without an audit forcing the government to do so, and be completely transparent with the money that has been set aside for this and the progress that we're making, and give regular updates to the Public Accounts Committee. I'm wondering if you would commit to that very reasonable suggestion today.
The Honourable Minister.
I'm going to refer the member to our Q1 report that identified our spending. That was a comprehensive report of the expenditures, and so I'll refer him to the Q1 report.
The member for Fort Garry.
In the media recently, you were quoted as saying that you expect the various programs to spend their allotted budgets before the fiscal year is through. If that is an accurate statement, can you confirm that? And can you confirm which programs you expect will have been completely spent by the time fiscal year ends?
Honourable Minister.
We put together one of the most comprehensive programs for businesses and individuals across the country. We don't know how long the pandemic is going to last. We do know that we're halfway through the year in terms of our expenditures. I can't tell you. It really depends on the protections of Manitobans. Is there more restrictions? How many would be in place? What other programs are available? So it's hard for me to tell you how much we're going to spend when we're halfway through the year. I certainly am not going to apologize for having appropriated for things like the Gap Protection Program, $160 million or $120 million. There is an appropriate amount of money that is left. We're not through the year. We think that there is an appropriate amount of money that's appropriated for these things. I hear the member somehow suggest, in some respects, that we're not spending all the money, but on the same, the same angle, he's somehow suggesting that we've got too much allocated in it. So I guess the question really to the member is, which is it?
The member for Fort Garry.
Now, you had indicated that the government set aside $2.4 billion for COVID supports, and I'm wondering, is that in one fiscal year or is that broken down over several fiscal years?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you. I'm going to refer you back to the Q1 report, but just to give you analysis of it. It's about $1.1 billion in this fiscal year. The other monies is related to capital projects that are related over a 2-year period.
Okay.
The member for Fort Garry.
Now, this $1.1 billion for this fiscal year, is that over and above what you originally budgeted in the spring? And this is new borrowed money on top of what you budgeted, not internal adjustments?
The Honourable Minister.
We had two budget appropriation bills. The first one was for $1 billion, which was made up for the most part about $500 million of health-related expenditures. $400 million, what we put in an account called ISA, and that's to have programs and policies in place. And the final was for $100 million appropriation. The second budgetary bill, which we passed last week, identified about $577 million. So what I would suggest is that the government has appropriated $1.577 billion. The latter budget bill was made up of a number of things, including $106 million that flowed to municipalities, made up of things like transit funding as well as operating funding to municipalities. It was made up of $40 million of education expenditures. That's a total of that. We allocated about $100 million to the education system, which was identified at the time as the second highest in the country. That $100 million, again, was made up of the $40 million appropriation in that bill, plus $48 million of money that we saved when the initial phase came down and schools shut down for the year, as well as $12 million for PPE. And there's a variety of other expenditures in the second budgetary bill. One represented about $47 million through education development, EDT, education and training that represented $47 million in workforce developments that will support businesses that need the support when we go forward, as well as about $133 some odd million in contingencies to support individuals. The reality is we don't know how long the pandemic is going to go on. My guess is that we'll be still talking about this, and individuals and businesses will need the supports for many, many months to come. And I think it will also have an impact on our budget appropriations. We lost about $1.5 billion in revenues and the expenditures that are there. So we're tracking towards about a $2.9 billion deficit. My hope is that it's better than that. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure two things happen. Number one, Manitobans are supported from a health perspective, and businesses and individuals are supported. And if you look what the Parliamentary Budget Office is suggesting is that we're amongst the highest in terms of the supports for Manitobans. But our decisions on supporting Manitobans businesses isn't done. And I would suggest that the year is only half over in terms of the expenditure appropriations.
The member for Fort Garry.
So the $800 million rainy day fund is not included in the $2.4 million or billion dollar commitment for COVID. Is that correct?
The Honourable Minister.
We're very proud of the fact that we rebuilt the rainy day fund. You may recall that under your previous government, you drained the rainy day fund. It was around $800 million. It got drained to about $110 million when we came to office. It was actually one of the first things that some of our Treasury Board officials had identified to us. Best practices suggest that you should have anywhere between 5 to 15% in some sort of a reserve. So we're very proud of the fact that we've replenished the rainy day fund to about $800 million. There was a time during the March shutdown where the capital markets, not just for Manitoba, but throughout the country, was pretty much dried up. And the fact that we had a rainy day fund, although we didn't tap into it, the rainy day fund was something that we would need to go to fund government operations, because the markets had completely dried up in terms of the dollars that were there. Now, the government of Canada, through monetary policy, had made some changes where they bought back or guaranteed T-bills, the short-term borrowings, as well as the longer term with the bond program that's made the spreads a little bit more even. We anticipate that borrowing, as we identified in the budget, was going to be about $5.6 billion. That was the normal course of action, and that has increased about $2 billion fold. So we anticipate it be anywhere between $7.5 to $9 billion, depending on supports and programs, and depending on what revenues we need and expenditures we need.
The member for Fort Garry.
So none of the $800 million in the rainy day fund has been allocated to any COVID programming.
The Honourable Minister.
The rainy day fund is something that all bond rating agencies have really credited our government with. We were disappointed again when we came to office, knowing the fact that the previous government had drained the fund, and that really impacts Manitobans. There's been some questions before, well, why have a rainy day fund if you can just go to the capital markets? Well, the problem with that logic is if you had that logic and you had an emergency situation and you had to go to the capital markets when the spreads in terms of how you borrow the money were wide, and that could cost tens of millions of dollars. So the fact that we have that money in reserve, and knowing the fact that we don't know where the pandemic will go and how much more supports that are in place, it's an important marker for Manitobans. And I think if you ask anyone in the bond rating agencies, they'll tell you that it's extremely important that government has reserve, and it's disappointing that it was drained to such a level under the previous government.
The member for Fort Garry.
So none of the $800 million in the rainy day fund has been allocated for COVID funds?
The Honourable Minister.
We haven't had to tap into the fund as of yet. There was a time in the March where all the capital markets were basically frozen out. So there'd be no provinces that could go and issue your bonds in March and get money. That would have been a dire situation, for a very dangerous situation for governments, because then you couldn't fund the bills. You couldn't fund to pay for your employees and other things like that. That is a concern. That's why we were so concerned when we came to office and found out that the rainy day fund had been drained from $800 million to $110 million. And we're very proud of the fact that now we have over $800 million in the rainy day fund. That fund might be, there may be a time in the very near distant future that we'll need to tap into that fund.
The member for Fort Garry.
How much has been spent on personal protective equipment, and if you could break it down on what materials have been purchased and in what amounts?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Yes, I'm going to give you two things. I'm going to refer you to, number one, the Q1 report on page number 3 that identifies the expenditures that are there. It identifies in Q3 about $178 million on face shields and masks. The report the Q1 report. The second is in gowns and Coveralls, about $104 million, or 29% of it. Gloves and hand sanitizers, about $22 million. Ventilators and other equipment, about $21 million. Nasal swabs, test kits, about $20 million, and other miscellaneous items, about $18 million. I can say that we are tracking to close to $408 million. And we also know that, and the Premier had indicated this in question period the other day, that we have a 6-month supply for this. Now, there's an accounting piece that happens here, just through accounting, through summary budgeting, as well as the PSAS accounting standards. You expense this when you actually use it. But what I can tell yourself, the committee, and Manitobans is that we have a 6-month supply of personal protection equipment and close to $400 million.
The member for Fort Garry.
Of the original $1.1 billion appropriation from the spring, how much has actually been spent and how much has not been spent to date?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Okay, I'm going to refer you to the Q1 report that was brought out. Now, additional money has been appropriated since then, which I can probably get a little more into details. But on page 6 of the report, it identifies where the money has been spent. Of that initial $1 billion commitment, we have spent $1.15 billion. And as you may recall, last week we appropriated additional $577 million. Allocated the money. Now, some of it flows to municipalities, some being $106 million, some is to fall through with our education spend, $40 million. Some is related to workforce development dollars. I think it's around $47 million. And there is some monies in contingency related to additional expenditures that we may have for either businesses or individuals or other cost measures that we would have in place. So I'm going to refer you to the Q1 report, but that, again, that is a little bit outdated, but that's why we needed the additional appropriation bill of the $577 million that was approved through the legislature.
The member for Fort Garry.
Now, in the $577 million October appropriation, you had indicated the other day that 230 of that million went to an ICIP type program. Now, my understanding that's the federal infrastructure program. That's a pre-existing program. So was this money that was already allocated to that program and it doesn't represent any new spending that wasn't going to take place in any event?
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I'm going to go through the budget document, and I'm going to directly answer the question as well to the member. So of the $577 million that we appropriated through the legislature for the additional budget bill, it was made up of $40 million for education, $106 million through municipal relations, and that was for the cities and municipalities, some for transit and some for just their operating grant. I think it was around just over 75 million for the operating and about 33, somewhere around there for the transit. The bulk of the transit the city got because it was based on ridership. There's only 3 or 4 different cities that has ridership in the province. There was through ISA, there was 433 million, I think the member's getting at. Of the capital programs, I think this answers this question, there is $280 million for what we're calling Manitoba Restart Capital. And of that was made up of $230 million, which was not appropriated in the previous budget for ISA type of funding. That's for different projects. We're waiting on approvals from Ottawa for these things. And about $50 million for water-related capital projects. So when municipalities had maybe wastewater projects, we identified about $50 million. So to answer the question directly, that was not money that was appropriated in the previous budget. Is $280 million of Manitoba, the Manitoba Restart Capital Program, made up of those subsections.
The member for Fort Garry.
Those are our questions for finance.
Are there any other questions? Hearing no further questions, we will now proceed to consideration of the resolutions relevant to this department. At this time, I invite virtual members to unmute themselves so they can respond to the question. I will now call resolution number 7.2. Resolution 7.2, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $27,962,000 for finance, fiscal and financial management for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Okay. Resolution 7.3. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $8,376,000 for finance, Treasury Board Secretariat for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.4. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $2,134,000 for Finance, Priorities and Planning Committee of Cabinet Secretariat for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.5. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $14,830,000 for finance, labour and regulatory services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.6. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $3,008,000 for finance, intergovernmental affairs for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.7. Resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $11,471,000 for finance, consumer protection for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.8, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $120,000 for finance capital assets for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 7.9, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $581,000 for finance, other reporting entities' capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 7.1A, the Minister's salary, contained in Resolution 7.1. The floor is open for questions. Seeing no questions, if no motions are forthcoming, oops, sorry, those are instructions to me. Resolution 7.1, resolved that there be granted to Her Majesty a sum not exceeding $11,092,000 for finance corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2021. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates for the Department of Finance. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Families. Shall we briefly recess to allow the Minister and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department? Committee recess. We'll recess for about 5 minutes and call in the Minister. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Families. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement? The Honourable Minister.
Good afternoon. It's an honour and a privilege as Minister of Families to introduce the 2020-21 budget estimates for the Department of Families. The COVID-19 pandemic has created hardships that our province has not endured for a generation. It has fundamentally changed how we work and how we live our lives. It has also changed how governments across the country provide services to vulnerable people, necessitating more support for workers and new ways of delivering the help that families need. I'm proud to say that the Department of Families has risen to those challenges. Across the department, and there's so many amazing people there, we have provided staff with the support, the personal protective equipment, and the risk recognition pay that they deserve. And we are investing record levels in the services Manitobans rely on, ensuring that we continue protecting our most vulnerable citizens as we combat COVID-19 pandemic together. In childcare, one of our earliest challenges was providing childcare to the children of essential service workers. Early in the pandemic, we created an online matching system to ensure that essential services workers could continue accessing the childcare they needed so they could go to work. I'm proud to say that this matching system continues to operate, enabling parents to look up vacancies and secure childcare when they need it. To keep early childhood educators safe and supported, we have invested in over 900,000 individual PPE items and provided 1,000 early childhood educators with $1.4 million in risk recognition pay. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have invested nearly $90 million in provincial operating grants for childcare centres throughout the province. In August, we signed a $15 million one-year extension to our bilateral agreement with the federal government that included a $2.4 million COVID-19 response grant to further help our childcare centres recover their COVID-related costs. Our government also recognizes that childcare will be critical to our economic recovery and growth when we emerge from this pandemic. Budget 2020 invests $181 million in the childcare system in Manitoba, almost $20 million more than the NDP ever invested in childcare in our province. Since forming government, we have created nearly 2,500 new spaces through our capital program, and we are investing $22 million this year in innovative new programs to expand the number of spaces available to parents who need childcare.
The hour being 5 o'clock, committee rise.
Well, we're on our way.